to Band Geek. I'm Richie Castellano. Today's episode is going to be about my trip that I just took to Ohio State University. This was last month in March, and I know a few people were curious to what I was doing there, what the trip was about, and I want to fill you guys in on all that fun stuff. It was a great trip. But first, let's take care of a little bit of business. If you want to support the show, use our tip jar. That's richiecastellano.com/tip jar. It brings you to a PayPal page. And it does, and we appreciate when you do that. It's just a regular form here. And if you use Amazon, you can go to riotcast.com/bandgeek, hit the Amazon banner at the top of the page, then do your shopping like normal, and it doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps the show out. Then, if you want to buy some cool Band Geek merch, head on over to richiecastellano.com. And you can find our Streamlabs merch store. We have all these cool hats. We got Your Mix is Whack hats. I mean, not hats, excuse me, shirts. Shirts, and we have some mugs and some posters. I also have some signed stuff on my website, so be sure to check that out. So that's the business. So now let's talk about what I was doing there. So the director of jazz studies at Ohio State University, now they have a serious jazz program. It's pretty... the kids were playing some pretty challenging stuff, and it was straight ahead jazz. Like there was a lot of, traditional stuff. He reached out to me. His name is Sean Thunder Wallace, and he reached out to me after watching some of my YouTube videos, and he said I would be a good candidate to be the headliner at their 42nd annual jazz festival. So, I was interested. We went back and forth on the phone a few times. And he said, you come down, you'll play a show with us, do some rehearsals, jam with the kids. And it's funny, I'm calling them kids because I still think of myself as that age. But now I realized I was in college 20 years ago. Yikes. And also do some clinics, teach some classes. And, I was into it. So I went there, and they handed me an itinerary of different things I was going to do, and it was a really great trip. So I want to take you through some of the things I did, because I thought this was a really cool thing that they did, just to give the students access to people that might not necessarily be in their field, because a lot of, to be honest, most of these students are studying, jazz performance. So to have access to someone who makes their living as a rock musician, it gives the students another perspective on things, another way to do things, because all their professors are pretty much jazz professors. So it was cool. So the first thing they handed me this itinerary, and the first thing on the itinerary was a jazz jam session with the students, and it was run by professors, and it was run by Professor Mike Smith, who I loved. He was great. I just liked the way he broke things down. He was a really charismatic professor. It's like you could see him being people's favorite teacher just because of how excited he gets about music. And on the technical side of things, there was a trumpet player, Anthony Stanko, who was unbelievable, and who I tried to steal a few licks from because he was great, and he was giving everybody some pointers, and I was absorbing this at the same time as the students. And then there was Dave Powers. Is that his name? Did I get that right? I think I got that right. Yes, Dave Powers, who was like a walking songbook. He knew everything, and he sang great and played great. It was awesome. But the topic of the class was rhythm changes. So if you don't know what rhythm changes are, it's the song "I Got Rhythm." I got rhythm, I got music, I got my God. Who can ask for anything more? Now, in the jazz genre, I sound like Bill Cosby. In the jazz, no, I got to stop that. In jazz, let me just say it like that. That's a tune that has been repurposed. So there's "I Got Rhythm," but then there's a bunch of other tunes that have been written where they take a new melody and put it over those chords. So it's very important for jazz musicians to be able to solo over that and to understand it. Now, I am not a jazz musician, so you might be wondering why I was asked to be a headliner at the 42nd Annual Jazz Festival, because the running joke on Band Geek is that I can't play jazz. Now, I can get by, but the point of it was that their show band is their only pop band, I guess. They're non-jazz band. So they asked me to play with that band. So I wasn't like, playing Donna Lee. I was playing Billy Joel tunes and rock songs. So that's why I was involved. But that being said, there was a lot of jazz going on. So I just sort of walked in with my guitar to this jam session as an observer, and Mike Smith asked me to come in and play, and it was fun because I haven't really played that kind of music in a school setting for a long time, and I played it, and I think I have like about one good chorus in me of rhythm changes, and luckily everybody in the room was taking one chorus. But then, of course, me being the guest, they asked me to keep playing. That's when I start, repeating myself and playing blues licks that don't belong in rhythm changes. But after that, after we did like the lesson part, we kind of sort of cut loose a little bit, and we did a blues. Now there's jazz blues, which is is this thing on? Yeah, jazz blues is like when you go, you know, well, but you put more chords in, and it's two fives, whatever. So they wanted to do a straight up Chicago blues, and which was very very nice to me. I think they were being kind to me. But I taped a little bit of the students playing, and this is what it looked like. So that was really cool of them to do that and to play something I was a little more familiar with. They actually, one of the professors, Dave Powers, he actually taped me playing over this, so this is what that sounded like. So that was cool. That was fun, and that was just like an optional thing I did on the first night. So then we started doing some work. So I also got to that was one of the optional things I said, but they also had concerts that they would do they did like some student concerts. I got to see all the student bands, the ensembles. They had two big bands. It was all wonderful, like real, challenging stuff, straight ahead jazz. They had like a fusion band, a bebop band, Latin, all this different kind of stuff. So the next day, one of the things I did was I taught a guitar class, and that was really cool. And I thought I was going to be talking about, licks and scales and whatnot, but they were really interested in gear. That's what I think that they've been focusing on technique and repertoire and the stuff you're supposed to focus on, but they don't really spend a lot of time talking about the tech side of things, and that seemed to be what I was focusing on a lot. I brought I don't have it with me right now. I brought the HX Stomp with me. I was gonna bring the full size Helix, but I decided that it was just too much to carry, so I programmed all my tones into the HX Stomp. And you know what? I'll put a link below to my custom tone page if you want to download some of my settings, my HX Stomp settings. So they were really curious about that because I was, like for example, they gave me an amp to plug into, and instead of plugging into it, I plugged into the aux input of the amp and just used my modeling sound. So they were really curious about that, how, because I think when you're not out there, when you're not doing gigs, you have sort of a perception of things that are based on like what you read on the internet. And the way I use the modeling stuff is, it's not to claim superiority over, huge pedal boards and tube amps. It's a necessity. I need to do it to make my gig easier, and just because of the amount of flying I do. So they were curious about that. They were curious about, getting sounds, tech, gear, guitars, and we talked all about that. And that was cool. And I also started rehearsing with the students. They broke me off into sectionals, and here is a sectional I did with the vocal students. Let me put this up. Here we go. What are we called again?
OSB Vox.
This is the vocal section, the OSB Vox. I've never had this many singers. Check this out. Let's do it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Tell her about it.
Tell her how you feel right now.
Tell her about it.
Girl, don't wanna wait too long. You gotta tell
her about it.
Tell her, but I screwed it up, but they're great. So, they broke me off into sectionals. I also did a guitar sectional, which is pretty cool. I'll show you that. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So that's we decided to do the rehearsals that way. Well, Sean Wallace did that. We were going to do the rehearsals where I would meet a couple times with the singers, meet with the guitar players, and go over our parts ahead of time just to get our stuff together in that respect. So I thought that was pretty helpful, a helpful way to do it. So another thing that I ended up doing was I also taught some clinics, but those came after the show. So maybe we should talk about the show first. Yeah, let's do it that way. So the show was I had the benefit of seeing the whole festival because I went to every show, and they had an alumni band. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name. It was a trombone player who was an alumni. They had a great piano player, Xavier Davis. I got to see all this amazing jazz, and I was sort of under the impression that when they said they had a jazz program, because with most schools, jazz means, at least it did when I was going to school, jazz meant anything that was not classical. But they were doing traditional jazz, so I was just wondering how the band I was going to be playing with fit into everything. But it was cool because it was different. So let me talk about the show. Oh, I'm forgetting one thing. Okay, I just remembered. I have something to remind me here. To promote the show, we did local news, NBC. We went on news at 6 in the morning. That was fun. But I joke that I know 4 jazz tunes, and they wanted to do Billy's Bounce, which is not one of my 4 jazz tunes. So I must have practiced that in the hotel room about 1,000 times. But here's that. I'll play that for you guys.
2, oh.
And that's Sean Wallace on sax. And that's Emerson Slicer on keyboards.
some soulful music before 7 a.m. I love it. If you guys were just here every day, this would really get us off going in the right direction. But it's a really great event, and I'm sure that you really hope that families come on out and show their kids what they could get into.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So important for the children. So the Jazz Festival continues tonight. It features the Ohio Show Band with Richie Castellano tomorrow. There will be jazz clinics, of course, and the closing concert is tomorrow night at 6. So a lot of fun. Liz, we got the special treat this morning.
Oh, it was so cool. And
We
this
did.
is definitely
So
Well, this weekend.
that was really fun to play, over jazz changes at 6 in the morning, because that's the great time to do that. But anyway, that was very cool. Here's a cool picture I took. I know this is kind of silly, but this is a picture I kind of liked. They had like a headline billboard thingy. I thought that was cool. I don't know. So this is all leading up to the concert, and I'll play you some songs from the concert. We did I think 8 tunes. I'm gonna just play a few of them, and I might skip around a bit. So here's some of the concert. Now they did one set of pop tunes, then they came back with some gospel, and then I came on after the gospel. So here's that one.
You don't know me, but I'm your brother. I was raised here in this living hell. You don't know my kind in your world. Fairly soon, the time will tell. You telling me the things you're gonna do for me. I ain't blind and I don't like what I think I see.
Taking it to the streets.
No more need for
Taking it to
running.
the streets.
Taking it, taking it
Taking it to the streets.
all night.
Taking it to the streets.
Take this message to my brother. You will find him everywhere. Wherever people live together. Tired of poverty's despair. You telling me the things you're gonna do for me. I ain't blind and I don't like what I think I see.
Taking it to the streets.
Taking it to the street.
Taking it to the
All right, so there. We did that. The next thing we did was a Chicago tune. And one thing I want to point out is this was really challenging. We did everything on in-ears, and there were clicks, and we were playing with tracks. And you can't see this on the side of the stage, but there were video screens with cool stuff to look at. So Sean really has this whole integrated thing, but it's very challenging because the spaces in between the tunes are very tight. The count-ins are tough. So it was very tricky. But let me show you the next tune. We had the Chicago tune here. I think we had a full start on this tune. Yeah. I'm sparing you the full start. If you want to see the whole video, I'm going to put a link in the description so you can watch the whole video, unedited by me. There we go.
Children play in the park, even though I'm alone in the dark, even though time and time again I see your face smiling inside.
I'm so happy
Oh,
that you love me. Nothing's lovely when you're near me. Tell me you will stay, make me smile.
living life is just a game, so they say. All the games we used to play fade away. We may now enjoy the dreams we shared so long ago.
Oh my darling,
Ooh,
got to have you.
got to have you.
You're my magic. When I hold you, cry sweet tears of joy, touch the sky. Now I need you
Oh, oh,
more than ever.
more than ever.
No more crying.
No more crying.
We're together. Tell me you will stay. Make me smile.
So that was cool. You're gonna hear a little something in my voice. I'm not making excuses. I'm happy with this. I didn't go for the woo because I'd been talking all week and I rehearsed all week for this and I rehearsed that day. So I was kind of singing around things. Let me see what the next tune is here. This was cool.
Hey, you. Hey, man. Ooh. You could have a steam train if you just lay down your tracks. You could have an
So, if you want to see the whole thing, again, link below. I'll play a bit of the last tune. I did a solo in Carry On Wayward Son, which I thought was cool. Not a solo. I did a solo in this one later, but we ended with Carry On Wayward Son. Where'd my mouse go? There it is. All right, so let me play the last tune. We also did a couple BOC tunes. So again, if you want to see those, watch that. I'm just gonna skip those for now, just to not make you watch the whole video in this video. You can always link back to it below.
Carry on my wayward son. There'll be peace when you are done. Lay your weary head to rest. Don't you cry no more.
I love the horns.
I was soaring ever higher, but I flew too high. Though my eyes could see, I still was a blind man. Though my mind could think, I still was a madman. I hear the voices when I'm dreaming. I could hear them say,
Carry on my wayward son. There'll be peace when you are done. Lay your weary head to rest. Don't you cry no more.
masquerading as a man with a reason. My charade is the event of the season. And if I claim to be a wise man, it surely means that I don't know. On the stormy sea with moving emotion, tossed about 'em like a ship.
All right. So again, I'm not gonna play the whole thing, but that was cool. And the way after the show, the next day they did a whole series of clinics, which I thought were really cool. And I was doing 3 clinics. I did one for high school students, one for music ed students, and one for performance students. So the one I did for the high school students, they wanted like a biographical thing. So I did this cool thing. I thought it was cool. When I try to teach music, I explained the way I learned music. The way I learned music was through the history of rock and roll. And it just so happened that when I picked up a guitar, the first thing I was into was 50s rock and roll. I was into Little Richard. I was into Richie Valens, Elvis, Chuck Berry. That's what I liked. That was my stuff. And I explained how the simple chord structure, it was great for a beginner. And then when I sort of wanted to learn something a little more complex, I moved on to the 60s, to the Beatles, and learned about, song structure and more advanced chords and a little bit of lead stuff. And then when I wanted to learn something a little more complex, I moved on to late 60s guitar stuff, Hendrix, Clapton. Those I love Eric Clapton, I love Jimi Hendrix. All that kind of stuff, a little more blues-based, harder stuff to play. And then when I wanted to learn something a little more complex than that, 70s, I was introduced to Queen, Yes, Pink Floyd, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Genesis. So I learned all that more progressive stuff, a little more virtuosic. And then when I wanted to really, sort of push myself as a guitar player and learn stuff that was really challenging to play, then I got into 80s rock. I got into Eddie Van Halen. I got into Yngwie Malmsteen and guys like that. So more of the shred stuff. So that's like that was my musical development, and how every time I wanted something next, I just looked at what the history of rock and roll had next for me. So I sort of talked about that, and I talked about my family and my dad and my uncle and my career and YouTube and with the Bohemian Rhapsody video and Blue Oyster Cult, and I talked about all that stuff. That was fun to talk to high school kids. And then the next thing I did was for music ed. That one was a little weird because I talked about a lot of guitar player stuff because that's what they wanted, but there were mostly band directors there. But still, I was able to show one thing I said, for example, is if you're doing a jazz band and the chart says C major 9, your guitar player is playing a C major chord, because most high school guitar players don't know 4-note chords or 5-note chords. So I said it might be a good idea as a jazz band director to have a chord chart that you can, when you hear the kid playing a power chord, because he's not sure, maybe you can go over to him and say, okay, look, here's the shape, try to learn this. But the most interesting clinic I did was for the performance majors, and I basically just I started talking about how to get gigs, not how to get gigs, but the right attitude to have. And it's simple stuff like showing up prepared, not being a jerk, doing your homework, having your sounds all together before you show up, basic stuff like that. Also, the power of referrals, don't refer someone who's a jerk. Make sure you always refer good people. And when you are referred, when someone refers you, make sure you do a good job for the person who refers. It's talking referrals, but the real focus of it was on YouTube and social media, because I think that a lot of the students and the faculty were curious about how YouTube works and how I use YouTube. And one of the things that came up was, why would I do, we were talking about, for example, gear reviews, right? And one person said, I might be paraphrasing, but said, why would I bother doing a review on this sax mouthpiece when there's 20 reviews on YouTube already? And I thought that was a very good question, and the answer to that is because people haven't seen the way you break down info, and that's what I find is very important with this social media where everybody has a platform, is that it's not about being the first person to do something. It's about presenting information in the way you present information, because there are YouTube channels that I follow specifically because I like the way the person speaks, or I like the way they break down info. So that's why you really shouldn't be discouraged by looking at any of this stuff. But it was a really great class, and it was supposed to be 50 minutes, and it ended up being an hour and 20 minutes because everybody had so many questions, and it was really fun. So that's what I did at Ohio State University. It was a really fun, most of the week. I guess it was 4 or 5 days I was there, but they got they got a lot out of me, and I was happy to do it because everybody was so cool. And everybody was talented. The students were really talented. The teachers were all great. They were super nice, fantastic players. It was a really great environment, and I would love to do something like that again. And so that's the video. Thanks for watching. And check out the links below. I have the things I mentioned. I guess I'm putting the HX presets and the full video to the show if you want to check it out. And that's it. I'll see you guys next time.